Hey now, what's going on, good people? Wanted to chime in real quick and talk about Trump's latest move in appointing Scott Pruitt, who was the Oklahoma General Attorney, to actually oversee the EPA, right? The Environmental Protection Agency. So I need y'all to know I'm really watching the moves that Donald Trump makes. And just like I had a conversation with a partner of mine, he asked me, why in the world, if Donald Trump is not running a scheme or a scam, why in the world would this dude want to go be president of the USA? My answer is simply this: because he really believes he can make a change. He really has been fed up with some of the things that he's been seeing, and he thinks he can do better. Well, I really like the move he made, and let me tell you why I like the appointment of Scott Pruitt. Because Scott Pruitt, in the eyes of many people, is what they're calling a skeptic of climate change, right? So either you believe in climate change or you don't, or let me say it this way: either you have been persuaded to believe climate change is real or you don't. You have to understand the history of what they're calling climate change. If you go back to 2005, climate change was not called climate change. Climate change was actually called global warming. Well, after they started saying that the carbon emissions and pollutants that were being put out into the air were causing all of, these, it was causing to wear away a thin layer of the Earth's atmosphere, and our great grandkids weren't going to be able to live on planet Earth. They scared people into believing, this thing really existed. Well, of course, the next thing to do is to have scientists go out and begin to study this global warming phenomenon to see if it's really true. Well, as the science came back and the data came back, there was no such thing as climate change. In fact, the Earth was getting cooler. So they could not theoretically call it climate change anymore because the evidence was in. There's no such thing as climate change. So they changed the name to, global warming was disproven. So the Earth wasn't getting warmer. Historically, the Earth has been getting cooler. So they had to change the name to climate change. Now, there was a lot of news made about Al Gore going to meet with Donald Trump just prior to his appointment of Scott Pruitt, which I thought was very interesting, because Al Gore is the real reason there's such a push for what is called climate change. And we all know that Al Gore was the vice president under Bill Clinton's administration. So, why is this such a big deal? Well, one thing you have to understand is Donald Trump is a global businessman. He understood some of the things involved in Brexit and why Britain was pulling out of the EU. And one of the reasons and issues had to deal with this so-called climate change and carbon credits, right? To paint a quick picture about what carbon credits are, think of it like this. If you drive a 1995 car and I drive a 2016 car, your car is going to emit more carbon monoxide than my car, right? It's just older. Well, as a result, you would have to pay for more carbon credits than I would. It just would make sense that your car is destroying the atmosphere a lot more than my car is because it's older. It's putting out more carbons. And you've heard the term carbon footprint. You have a high carbon footprint. Now, In America, we had not gotten to that point yet, but we were moving in that direction, especially over these last 8 years. Well, one of the ways that governments increase taxes is that they start levying or imposing a lot of restrictions on companies, right? So these companies, they either raise their costs or they raise their costs down the line somewhere to the consumer, and the consumer ends up basically paying for these things. You have to remember, governments have no money. They have $0. They get their money by taxing the people. Well, when you consider what was going on in the EU, people in Europe have been telling us in the USA it's just not being reported over the news media, not on a broad scale in the news media, but they've been telling us, listen, they're about to try to run a number on you with this global warming, this climate change, and these carbon credits, because after all, we all do breathe the same air, right? So if here in America, our businesses are producing whatever it is, whether it's manufacturing, toys, whether it's a coal mine, especially these coal mines, that's a big issue. But the emissions go into the air. So if people in China or in third world countries are breathing the air, they're actually, in theory, breathing emissions that other countries are putting into the air. Well, the thought was that since the USA is, we're producing in China, they're producing all of these emissions, we should have to pay carbon credits to these other third world nations who are, they're not producing as much as we are. That's another way of taxing the American people, or robbing from the rich to pay to the poor. And, this is one of the things that Trump saw. So I wish I could have been a fly on the wall to hear what Gore was trying to sell to Trump before, Trump appointed Scott Pruitt, because I'm pretty sure that Al Gore heard through the grapevine who his appointment was going to be, right? Well, let me read something to you. This is from Forbes magazine, actually off of their website, Forbes.com, okay? And in this article, it talks about Al Gore and his partner, David Blood, which I thought that was a pretty funny name, and how they started the Generation Investment Management group. And actually it's an actual fund, right? And in this fund, it says that Gore and Blood, the former chief of Goldman Sachs Asset Management Group, co-founded London-based GIM, not American-based, London-based, in 2004. Between 2008 and 2011, the company raised profits of nearly $218 million from institutions of wealthy investors. By 2008, Gore was able to put $35 million into a hedge fund and private partnerships through the Capricorn Investment Group, his group, which is founded in Palo Alto, right? A group that he founded founded by his Canadian billionaire buddy, Jeff Skoll. Jeff Skoll was the first president of eBay, and it was Skoll's participant media that produced Gore's feverishly frightening 2000 horror film, An Inconvenient Truth. So if you look at this, it's really like a documentary, or look at An Inconvenient Truth, and they're selling you on the idea of well, they're not selling you, they're scaring you on the idea of climate change. Well, remember, in 2005, it wasn't climate change, it was global warming. So think about the movie 2012, right? And don't think for a second these guys aren't working, or we're not working with Hollywood to push this type of information out. it's not even really a movie. They're really just trying to teach you something through a movie. But 2012 had to do with the core of the earth heating up and getting so hot, you know, that or the core of the earth temperature being so affected that it was causing these problems and destruction was coming to the earth, right? Well, you have to understand that, you know, Trump, being a businessman, knew what was happening in Europe. He saw how the European companies and people were being taxed through these carbon credits, which when Britain pulled out of Brexit, when they left the EU, shall I say, this whole idea of Brexit was huge, simply because the people were making a statement. We see how you all have been mad dogging us through these make-believe ideas and selling it. And they've been warning us here in the US. So it was a huge move. So I want you to know, man, I'm really watching Trump. I really applaud, you know, what he's done with this move. If he continues moving down this direction and what he's doing, I can do nothing but salute the man. So I'm just watching it, man. I want to encourage you guys. I'm going to post a link at the bottom of this video to a real brief documentary that shows you climate change, global warming is nothing but a farce from a proven scientific point of view. See, a lot of the scientists that these guys have hired to prove their methods, when the data and facts come back and the scientists say we don't agree with you, they get their funding pulled from them. You know, and there are documented cases. You can find this. These scientists get their funding pulled from them because they're not reporting what Gore and his people want to have, you know, pushed and promoted. So what I didn't like was, of course, Barack Obama in his 2 terms continued to magnify climate change, and then Hillary would have just continued to do the same until eventually we would have been paying these huge phantom taxes through different types of carbon credits that they've really been trying to push on us. That was another reason I didn't like someone who has the idea of being a globalist versus America being an independent democratic republic. So, hey, any questions you want to ask, something I may have just mentioned and blew by, but shoot me a question, you know, type it below. I'll respond to the best of my ability. But salute Donald Trump, elect Donald Trump, you know, President-elect Donald Trump. And man, I just like the way this guy's going right now.